I once was this guy in the gym, but now I will be that guy in the gym. However, I have a very important theory I want to try to experience by only training extra range of motion. What were the benefits and the downsides? Let's find out. But you gotta focus. Getting started on day 1, I spent 15 minutes mobilizing the hips, the legs, and the lower back. Going in and out of the deep squat position, moving around, going into lunges. Whenever I felt an area that was tight, I didn't push past discomfort. I just approached that range of motion multiple times to get blood flowing to that area. 15 minutes is so much longer when you actually time it. I've got to be honest, before this, I've probably only spent like 45 seconds doing warm-ups similar to this, and even that was rare. Now before I added a ton of strange range to the squat, I wanted to get warmed up with a few bodyweight squats, but without my knees making a nasty cracking noise. So for me, from years of doing power moves, my abductors have become extremely tight and my adductors have become extremely loose. I believe this has led to me having slight patellar malalignment, my patella shifting more to the outside, causing a cracking noise when I go up in a squat position. In order for me to stop this from happening, I need to physically and or mentally apply tension to my adductors, the muscles on the inside of the leg, to help ever so slightly shift that patella over and track it so it doesn't crack anymore. After doing about 5 sets of 10 of these slow and controlled squats, I felt like I was making enough mind-muscle connection to my adductors to continuously keep things aligned properly. At this point, I slowly started to increase the range of motion, going far beyond parallel into a deep squat and then adding in some back flexion. Now with this back flexion, there is severe rounding of the back, and usually in a traditional squat you would want to keep the back neutral, but this wasn't evolving into a traditional squat. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the chocolate chip scooper squat. Quite a bit awkward at first, but the idea was to not only activate the legs but the entire posterior chain with every rep. And one of the problems that almost every single exercise will be addressing is that while naturally some points of a lift might feel stronger than others, I am theorizing with years of training some of those areas become so strong and others untouched become so weak that this leads to a long-term chronic imbalance, immobility, and less confidence to approach life if you're ever put in an awkward situation that doesn't fit the range of motion of the lifts that you're used to. For instance, say there's a guy who can squat 500 pounds super strong, but then bends over to pick up a water bottle and blows his back out because he had to round his back slightly and he was never used to that. If you guys have a story of any of these anomalies and you want to share it, feel free to leave a comment, let me and everybody know. I would be very interested. And that brings me to an epiphany I had early on in this experiment. A great compromise when doing full range of motion exercises is the fact that you are only as strong as your weakest link in that range of motion. While I could have loaded up way more if doing normal squats, I was only confident enough to go to an 8-pound medicine ball doing these scooper squats. So obviously, if the legs were a primary target, this may not be optimal, but the idea behind this entire experiment is to even everything out more. Now, it was quite strange to quit primarily a squatting motion when it felt like the legs had way more juice in them. What felt like it was fatiguing first was perhaps this fascia that felt like it was from my upper body all the way to the back of my heels. Now, whether this was actually a single piece of connective tissue or accumulation of all of my weak points in my posterior chain, I ended up doing 5 sets of 8 to 12 reps, slow and controlled, and then moving on. The next exercise, using a bench and a box to start with some extra deep lunges. Now this was just a warm-up for I would eventually add some weighted rotational movement at the bottom of the lunge. For once again, in real-world athletic scenarios, rotational movements are quite frequent. On top of this, the silly box bench setup was severely challenging my balance, something I've also let recently slack on my lower body. finally able to line everything up and add weight. Doing this challenging coordinated movement while trying to maintain balance, I once again was only confidently able to go up to an 8-pound medicine ball, and you can see I'm still struggling in certain positions in this move. Once again, only as strong as the weakest link. However, I was able to accomplish 7 reps each side for 5 total sets. It might not seem like a lot, but after this, I was so fatigued from just those 2 exercises. So I only managed to do 3 sets of these extra deep glute bridges using the bench and the box, and then finishing up with some extra deep calf raises just using my body weight. So that was awkward and challenging, but I do have to say right now, my back feels the best it ever has after a leg day. And I don't just mean like, oh, it feels loose and good. It feels like significantly better. It feels like it was stimulated in a way that it needed to. Maybe that's just where my mind's at. Like, I felt good walking back to the car, man. So day 1, legs, only a couple exercises, but so far so good. We've got to do this one, extra R.O.M right here. Just getting motivated. Now, another fundamental to this workout approach was that I was going to take every other day off. A lot of these extra range of motion movements, although derived from a specific portion of the body, end up targeting pretty much the entire body. So I wanted to be sure that some of those micro muscles that may have been hit on doing a leg day, for instance, when doing extra range of motion, would be recovered more when going into an upper body day, because some of those muscles might be also targeted as well. And shout out to Snap Supplements for sending me a restock of this organic beetroot powder supplement, as well as Joint Health, which I feel like paired very well with this experiment. If you guys want 20% off any Snap supplement, you can use my affiliate link in the description. Jeez. Ugh. Day 3, moving on to upper body, warming up with some decline pull-ups, going slightly extra range into this muscle up like motion. Calisthenics tip: if you are working on trying to achieve a muscle up or improve your muscle ups, working on the coordination in this decline movement can actually help a lot. On the contrary, continuing to warm up with the TRX bands with these decline push-ups, slowly going to maximum chest stretch. Starting the first workout with these single arm rotational rows, trying to maximize a rotational pulling motion. Everything from the glutes, lower back, lats, rhomboids, rear delts, biceps, as well as other elbow flexors were brought into play. However, as opposed to a traditional single arm row where the primary targeted muscles of the back would give out first, other muscles used for this extra range of motion that were weaker, the weakest links, would be the limiting factors to this exercise. Now, a mistake that I made early on that was limiting the range of motion was putting my outside leg on the inside. Now you'll see when I switch and I put the pulling arm side leg towards the back, I get a nice extra twist when I pull the cable. It just felt like it opened up more range of motion. Next, moving on to dumbbell press with a slight incline, using the dumbbells specifically so I could go as deep as possible on the range of motion. Feeling a very similar stretch at the bottom to the lengthened partial experiment, but then having to press all the way through out to the top, I had to back the weight down significantly. In the partial range of motion experiment, I was able to lift a lot more weight at the bottom of this range of motion, but for some reason when incorporating a deep bottom range with a full top range, I felt so much weaker. Look at that. Extra R.O.M rash. Moving to lateral raises. Now traditionally when doing a lateral raise, your deltoids are primarily activated up until your arms are at the parallel point with the ground. After this range, the trapezius tends to come into play. This feels like a very weird 1-2 muscle group to activate, but that's probably just because I've been training with such confinement for so many years in the gym. Bringing me back to that argument, what if real life requires you to lift your arm higher than normal in this fully extended like motion? It may feel awkward to someone who only does parallel lateral raises. Moving over to front raises using a cable machine for that tension throughout the full entire range. Once again, going above the head, bringing into play the traps as well as the sternocleidomastoid, a muscle group in the neck. You can really see the full upper body struggle to coordinate this movement. It's just something that I wasn't used to. Going over to 3 sets of only 5 of these extra deep dips, I couldn't get any more than that going so deep and so slow. The overall systemic fatigue was becoming overwhelming. However, I did finish up with some extra deep single arm dumbbell rows to round out this workout and hopefully correctly mobilize that upper posterior chain. Body feels really good after that. Like I just feel it's like more functional. That's what this is. Oh my gosh, this is functional training. This is CrossFit, isn't it? 48 hours later, warming up for another primarily lower body targeted day. This time incorporating some yoga into the warm-up. Honestly, the cat-cow looks very tantalizing, but I'm telling you, me having lower back tightness, this is one I shouldn't neglect. Holy smokes. Yo, the delusion I had. Check this out. So standing up, if I go to touch my toes, with a little leg bend, you know, I can get them. Well, if I actually put my legs to their true straight position for me, and I go to try to touch my toes, oh my gosh. That's as far as I can get comfortably right there. And I am feeling that from like the top of my head, through my back, through the back of my knees, even in my ankles almost. And I'm wondering, is this lack of flexibility in the true straight leg position one of the primary reasons for my reoccurring back injuries? I don't know, but that's something we're going to address today slowly. Often in the fitness and bodybuilding world, we look at segments of the body as separate segments, parts. The biceps, the delts, the quads, the hamstrings, the calves, etc. But in reality, when you actually look at an anatomy model, a cadaver, or just look at yourself in the mirror, you realize everything is connected. The body likes to work together, and maybe, just maybe, sometimes training these segments too much over others can, once again, back to the theory, lead to imbalance, increasing the likelihood for injury. So trying to address this entire region of posterior fascia tightness, I started with slow and controlled reps of just toe touch attempts, not forcing with my core or anything, but just letting gravity do its work. From here, I added just 5 pounds to each hand, and you could really feel it throughout the entire posterior chain. But almost like I just mentioned, a complete posterior fascia fatigue rather than any specific muscle group. I did 5 sets of 10 reps using 10 pounds. Next, using a straight bar and with a straight back, so I am not rounding my back anymore like I was, I did some Romanian deadlifts. Trying to go as deep as possible, but indicating to me that one of my limiting factors in this mobility is severe hamstring tightness. Trying to make improvements, not trying to pull a muscle, I only loaded the bar up to 65 pounds and just allowed gravity plus this weight to help not only stretch but mobilize my hamstrings throughout a deeper range of motion. When really focusing, this was actually so much harder than just muscling a heavy weight up in a deadlift. You can see this when I start to shake in the knees at the bottom. Next, setting up and elevating some plates to stand on for some wide, extra deep teabag squats. Or whatever they're called. This time trying to limit any butt winking and keeping the back neutral, but also trying to get as deep as possible in the hips, simultaneously keeping control on the adductors to once again prevent that patella malalignment and that cracking noise. Just trying to coordinate all of this together was very challenging and fatiguing. However, I felt like with every rep I was making improvements and working on spots that really needed work. So I just kept doing set after set for a total of 8 sets of 10 reps, what with only 30 pounds of added weight. Now, I was planning to try out more extra range of motion exercises, but after just these 2, I was done. It's really silly. I barely lifted any weight for these exercises, but I'm so tired now. I'm just done. I'm wondering if I'm getting a similar response to that relaxed feeling you might get after you stretched, because essentially I'm going through so much range of motion, because essentially this was really a big stretching session, especially to the tightest parts of my body. Seriously though. Regardless, 48 hours later, I started warming up with a very similar approach as the previous workout day, doing the toe touchers, but check this out, I was already getting so much deeper. Continuing the warm up with regular bodyweight squats, addressing those weak and tight points, and then eventually working into the scooper squats. This time I was able to confidently bump the weight up to 15 pounds rather than just an 8-pound medicine ball. 5 sets of the deep rotational lunges, but this time with 15 pounds. And then trying out something similar to an exercise I see a ton of athletes doing, a cable twist, targeting everything from the upper body, core, even some of the legs, all in the rotational axis. Finishing up with 3 sets of chest flies, but really going deep in the back to get the stretch through the chest and the shoulders and activate more mobility throughout a greater range of motion. And this was supersetted with 3 sets of standing rows going extra long. So after 4 days of training every other day, was this effective or just a stupid waste of time? Well, here are my thoughts. What is up, Home Slice? So in summary, I believe this was perhaps one of the best challenges I could have done. Now, even though this isn't really a challenge targeting muscle hypertrophy, I did take before and after visuals to compare. And looking at the before and after pictures, first of all, I'm actually 1 pound lighter in the afters. When I do look at my shoulder regions, it actually looks like they kind of loosened up a little bit and evened out. And I don't know whether this is stemming from the shoulder trap region or actually just from the whole entire back itself evening myself out, or if it's just like a coincidence. Now also my posture in the afters on a side view here, it actually looks like it has improved. Anyways, a huge takeaway point from this experiment that I discovered early on was that I was only as strong as my weakest link throughout really any range of motion, but specifically the full range of motion. And I think that's very important to take into consideration because it may be like a real life unpredictable scenario. If you were going through a heavy load and then all of a sudden you're in a range of motion that you're not used to, that could lead to a potential injury. Not only that, but doing these full range of motion movements are building mobility, flexibility, and just keeping almost like your mind-muscle, mind-body, mind-movement connection going and even enhanced in some aspects. Also balance as well. Balance was challenged a lot throughout a lot of these different exercises because of just such a wide range of motion. However, the biggest downside that should be obvious just training extra range of motion was if I was trying to target specific muscles and muscle groups, like in a bodybuilding sense, heck, even in like a strength performance sense. For instance, if I was really trying to build leg power, just doing those scooper squats would be way less effective than doing something just like a front squat or a regular back squat. Because with all that extra range going under the legs and reaching and stretching as far back as possible and curving the back, you know, I was only able to go up so much in weight. And honestly, the squat up, targeting the legs, it was actually very easy. Where I really got fatigued was, like I mentioned in the video, this just like overall posterior, just fascia-like feeling. Very strange, very different. But like I just mentioned, maybe if that goes untrained for so long, well, you get so confined just training regular squats that, well, you might have a problem if you ever did accidentally or had to go into an extra range of motion like movement. Now, I do know a lot of athletes, specifically CrossFitters, but also bodybuilders and powerlifters and strength athletes alike will train extra range of motion like movements in the form of R.O.M watts. I think they're like range of motion workout of the days and other things similar to that. But a lot of us bros, when we're just going to the gym day in, day out, we often neglect these forms of movement. And even myself, coming from a background of a lot of mobility like movements, I recently have neglected mobility a ton. And it doesn't take long. It seems like it doesn't take long for just it to go away and potential problems to arise. You guys saw that problem that arose in the last challenge video. That was very discouraging and very eye-opening to the fact that mobility, just like anything else, if not maintained, will go away. You don't use it, you lose it. At least that is what I am concluding based on this experiment. So from here on out, I'm going to be regularly implementing mobility into my training routines, especially going into this functional bulk I have coming in a couple of weeks, which probably by the time you're watching this video, I will be close to starting. But yes, I do have 1 or 2 more unrelated challenges in the work. And the next one might be a little silly, but is going to be very visually stimulating. I went and I filmed this at the right time, and I'm glad it all came together, so stay tuned for that one. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day. Don't forget to subscribe and turn those notifications on. Peace. I will see you all in the next video.